And today we will be having a debate with two amazing individuals in the democratic space, one from Sierra Leone and the other from Liberia. From Sierra Leone, we have the executive director for the Citizens Forum for Democratic Accountability. He's in the person of Marcus Bangura. Mr. Marcus, welcome to the program.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Right, thank you very much. And also all the way from Liberia, we have the executive.
Thank you for having me.
And all the way from Liberia, we have the executive director for the Center for Transparency and Accountability, Central, in the person of Anderson Miami. Mr. Anderson, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on your platform.
Thank you very much. So already, as Imo introduced, today we'll be focusing on institutions that we'll be looking at the role of institutions in supporting or promoting democracy and also hindering it. Are they playing two-edged sword format here? These same institutions are very critical in the promotion of democracy, yet some of their tenets and actions seems to be stifling the growth of democracy in our respective countries on the sub-region. So first up, let's get into the discussions, and let me begin with you, Mr. Anderson Miami. Of course, in Liberia, there is the latest, hottest development in the country where the Supreme Court has actually adjudged that the appropriate speaker is Mr. Konati Kofa, and I would just want you to also bring us up to speed. What is the whole atmosphere like? What is the whole atmosphere like in Liberia at the moment?
Thank you. Like I said, it's a pleasure being here. Liberia is relatively calm, but politically there's a bit of storm because over the last 6 to 7 months, we've had an impasse at the lower house of parliament, what we call here the House of Representatives. There've been a leadership struggle in terms of who's the speaker. We have the elected speaker, but there's been different conversations taking place. He was reportedly removed. The matter went to court, and the court ruled recently that the process that led to his removal was not lawful. And so the court declared him still as the speaker, but there have been different conversations. Some of the government actors have welcomed the decision of the court, but others have been making denigrating comments, having different positions regarding the court's ruling. Civil society and other stakeholders have been calling for the different parties to respect the ruling of the court. The government issued a position statement yesterday announcing that it welcomes the court's decision and that it looks forward to the different parties doing the needful to resolve the conflict at the legislature. Last night or last evening, the president spoke, and he also made mention of the court's ruling, but then said that the executive will do business with the block of the House of Representatives that has quorum. That was a kind of troubling for many people because the government is welcoming the decision on one hand, but then it is saying that it is going to work with the group of lawmakers where quorum is. So what that means basically is they have been doing business with the de facto speaker or the speaker that has been declared by the court as being illegitimate. Basically, what the government or the president has said is that until otherwise, until the legitimate speaker that has been recognized by the Supreme Court can get the numbers, they will continue to do business with the bloc that has been leading the legislature over the last 6 months. But so that's where we are. They sees a lot, about the conversation we're having regarding democracy institutions that are supposed to enhance democracy, what needs to happen to ensure that we foster, nurture, and sustain democracy. We'll come to that, but that's what it is regarding the ruling from the court in the matter involving members of the House of Representatives in Liberia.
Interesting development there. And so that leads us to the question, and I'm still staying with you, Mr. Anderson Miame, that from where you sit, what are the key institutions that ought to uphold democracy in our society from where you sit?
There are different institutions that can uphold democracy. And as we know, the audience will know, democracy is basically government for the people, by the people, and of the people. So what that means is citizens play a very important role or roles when it comes to democracy, sustaining democracy, nurturing democracy, and all of that. But the different institutions, and one of the institutions is in our case in Liberia, which is the case in many West African countries or other countries around the world, you have three branches of government. You have the executive, which has the president and the officials that are appointed by the president to steer the affairs of the country or to enforce the law. You have the judiciary, that is the interpreter of the laws. The judiciary also makes laws, but foremost, they interpret laws. And you have the parliament or the legislature that makes law actually, but then also provides oversight and other play other functions in a democracy. So these are the three branches of government basically that play very important roles in a democracy. But if you go further to that, you have civil society, for example, you have the media, you have even the private sector that plays a very important role. You have citizens, you have integrity institutions, for example, or anti-graft institutions. You have institutions like the security sector or paramilitary institutions that also play important roles. You have the electoral bodies, like what we have in Liberia called the National Elections Commission that oversees electoral processes. So all of these different institutions come together to make up the institutions that support democracy. We could go into the specifics in terms of the different rules to play, at some point, but I just wanted to name some of the institutions initially, and subsequently we can talk about the specifics in terms of what role to play in a democratic environment.
Right. And so after naming all of these institutions, just a yes or no, are there possibilities that these same institutions can hinder democracy? Yes or no?
Definitely, yes.
Okay. So at the back of that, I then travel all the way to Sierra Leone and then engage Mr. Marcus Bangura, the executive director for the Citizens Forum for Democratic Accountability, C4D. Mr. Marcus, bring us up to speed. What is the atmosphere, the democratic atmosphere like in Sierra Leone at the moment? Once again, so sorry for the fire that gutted the State House some weeks ago. So sorry for that. But generally, bring us up to speed. What is the democratic atmosphere like in Sierra Leone?
Thank you very much. We are not far from Liberia. So we are the same political geopolitics, right? Having said that, you will agree with me that for some time, for quite too long, Sierra Leone political gymnastics has been caught in the web, because after the elections in 2023, there have been a lot of suspicion and distrust in respect of the outcome of the election results. But things have been going on. People were expecting that electoral justice will be put in place. And there are still people who hold the strongest conviction that one day electoral justice will come to pass, whilst there are others who hold the government, pro-government officials or supporters believe that the election has been conducted, it has passed, and things are going on, nothing is going to put it aback. So these are the songs around, and the dance to the tune of what is being said, depending on the individual and the political party he belongs to. But so far, so good. That is the situation in this country. The country is caught in the web. Sierra Leone, as a country, has been highly regarded and respected for its democracy since 1996. After the military coup in 1992, we had an election in 1996, and since then, we've had successive elections. The 2023 election is exceptional because of what we saw that followed after the elections. For example, a lot of things happened. Even the international community described the election in their own way, the way they saw it. So we've been expecting that things will actually change. But it's democracy. So our democracy is in a mixed bag, as a matter of fact. It is not as we expected it to go. Because you look at the political institutions, because when you talk about democracy or good governance, one thing that comes to mind is the principles of democracy. And these principles of democracy can never be effective unless the police or unless institutions, state institutions, put them into effect. Because state institutions play instrumental role to shape democracy in a country. That is why, just like my brother was saying from Liberia, in my own perspective, a government is like a generator or a car that is made up of different parts. Say, for example, a generator, to operate it, you need certain things to be put in place. I can refer to a generator like government, the way governments run, which is to say it is made up of different parts. My brother was talking about the three organs of government: legislature, executive, and the judiciary. And also, you look at a generator, for example, a car, it needs fuels, it needs plugs. You know, if one thing is absent, the possibility for it to work effectively and efficiently, it will be very, very difficult. So that is why I associated it to a generator. And all of these parts have a role to play. Where one is dysfunctional, it renders the state unworkable. You know, we have the judiciary, for example. If we talk about democratic principles, we talk about holding democracy. The court, for example, plays a very instrumental role because whenever there is a disagreement or constitutional conflict, it is referred to the court. For example, in Sierra Leone, the High Court, the Supreme Court deals with constitutional matters. So when it comes to elections, the Supreme Court is expected to handle a situation of that nature. And in doing so, there is always the need for both sides to be satisfied. If one side doesn't have confidence in the system, then the possibility for us to uphold democratic, good governance and democracy will be very, very difficult because the features of democracy speaks volume about justice, about equity, you know, about justice delayed, that is justice denied, about the presumption of innocence. All these things put together. Because if I reflect to the 2023 elections and its outcome, the opposition party that claimed it won the election was asked to go to court. But what the leader said was that he did not have confidence in the judiciary. So that's a major factor to take into consideration. Though you have not asked, but I'm just moving. You know, looking at the electoral bodies. Yes.
Yes.
Sir.
So,
can I continue?
Well, I will still stay with you because that would obviously tie in my next question. That how worrying is it when institutions are democratically structured, yet practically they are not? You talked about confidence in the judiciary. In other parts of the sub-region, some political actors still do not have confidence in the judiciary because they feel that it becomes a tool for oppression, rather.
Yes. If Africa in general, or West Africa, or my country, Sierra Leone, is to progress, the judiciary should be the pillar for justice, because it's the habitat we rely on for one to actually feel free that, yes, we have equity in this country. But when it is lacking, there is a very serious problem. Apart from elections, you look at other aspects, individuals, you go down the street, you meet people, you interview them, they tell you that they don't have confidence in the judiciary. That is one area. That is to say, where people living together may have conflicts. You have others who believe that if the issue is taken to courts, it will be at their expense. At the end of the day, justice will not be given. So it is clear and it is bad. It means that we are standing nowhere and we don't have the determination to actually push forward, because we have a constitution. There is a saying that it is a law and not man that is supreme. And nobody is punishable in both body and property except for a distinct breach of the laws of the land. And in that situation, we expect the judiciary, right, to serve in a capacity wherein individuals within the states will have confidence in it. Because if the judiciary is not that strong, or if there is lack of confidence in it, it will affect other areas. It will have ripple effects in other areas. Because reason for conflict after elections is because they don't trust the judiciary. Where the judiciary is trusted, right? And you find out that an election conducted has been fouled. What will you do? You take redress to the courts. Well, if the confidence is not there, the proclivity for you to take confidence in the court will be very, very, very difficult, right? You look at other areas, for example, electoral bodies. In Sierra Leone, we call our electoral body ECSL. That is to say, the Electoral Commission for Sierra Leone. And this electoral commission, the current one, has been caught in a web of conflicts that has led to a lot of commotions, disturbances, because after the elections, what came out after the elections, the internal wrangling, in the country within political parties and intra-political party activities, has been a problem, because we expect electoral commission to be independent, right? Our constitution, through an act of parliament, and the parliament, right, through an act, established the Electoral Commission of Sierra Leone. And it has its responsibility. For God's sake, it should endeavor to execute those responsibilities. Once it is done properly, I believe we will not have conflict when it comes to elections. You look at other areas apart from you look at parliament. Parliament has a role to play. Yes, the electoral commission. Then if you look at parliament again, parliament is an institution that is viable to shape democracy in a country. In the first place, parliament is established for deliberation on issues of national interest. And once they are there, they should endeavor to make sure that they don't take sides, though it will be very difficult looking at the political nature, But we've seen situations where even bad bills can be passed into law as far as the government in power is ready for it to be passed into law.
Right.
We have seen bills taken to parliament that have been passed at emergencies, which most times such bills are not good for the nation. And again, if you look at parliament, we have this issue of, which is also a very important principle of checks and balances to avert political power being centralized in one hand. That is why we have checks and balances. We are the organs check each other. Now, let's say I've never seen in Sierra Leone wherein the executive or the president made political appointments and those individuals goes to parliament and disapprove. They have always been approved, which is also not good. So the problems are many for our democracy. To stand on its legs is very challenging.
Right. And so right at the back of all of that, it comes to the issue of politicization of almost everything. And that would make me once again go back to Liberia and then engage Anderson Miami. And we want to find out that how worrying it is when government of the day ought to wear apart their political colors and then deal with issues in a holistic, nationalistic manner, yet would want to politicize everything, where institutions that ought to provide justice are politicized, institutions that ought to hold respect for rule of law, give some level of confidence and national patriotism has all been politicized. How worrying is that? And how does that deepens or weakens the fabric and fiber of democracy in society?
Yeah, thank you. My colleague was doing a good job there talking about the different sub-elements or components of democracy and the institutions that are needed to nurture and sustain democracy. And he was talking about principles. Independence is one of the key principles when it comes to democracy, especially so institutions like the judiciary, like the anti-graft bodies, like the electoral bodies that are supposed to be independent in the things they do, such that they have the confidence of not just the public but development partners. In Liberia, we've been making efforts to have independence at the level of the different institutions we have. But there have been some actions and decisions that have tended to undermine the independence of some of these institutions. So I would say, for example, that some of the issues can be direct and indirect. For example, let's look at the public integrity institutions that are supposed to help to give government the face, the reputation, and everything it needs to be in good standing with the public in terms of, for example, ensuring that public resources are allocated and used in ways that benefit the public, in ways that address, different rights issues, whether the right to education, the right to healthcare, the right to clean environment, and all of that. So these institutions by law are supposed to be adequately supported so that they operate. By law also, there are processes around recruiting the officials and commissioners and those who serve this on the different either boards or the leadership levels of these different institutions. Some of the time, the processes around recruiting these people have been politicized. People are handpicked against established processes that are supposed to be robust enough, that are supposed to ensure that the best, and the more independent-minded people around are recruited to serve in these institutions. That also plays a part in weakening or reducing the level of confidence that people have in the system. And once people have less confidence in democratic institutions like the police, what that leads to is more violence. Just over the weekend, last weekend, the government initiated a campaign to ensure that it deals with issues around jungle justice, mob violence. And we were at that program. One of the key issues that many of the people cited was limited trust in a system. When people have issues and go to the police will not intervene on time. Or when they take matters to court, as it is often said, justice is meted for those who have deep pockets and not, those who cannot afford. While that has been dealt with to understand, but we still have that as an issue. So what I'm saying in essence is, if there is limited trust in the system, if the police is not independent enough in conducting its work, if the anti-graft institutions are not independent enough in doing the work that they're supposed to do, if the judiciary is not independent enough, it leads to distrust. And once there is distrust, people will take the law into their own hands. When they have issues, instead of going to the courts, instead of going to the police, they will decide to take matters into their own hands, which helps, to make the society unsafe. So independence is important. The government has to ensure that certain processes are depoliticized. If recruitment processes to ensure that people go to integrated institutions, for example, or serve at the level of the judiciary, there should be very clear processes that lead to recruitment of these people such that those who eventually get selected to serve are people who have the trust and confidence of the people, and not just people that are the confidants of the president, for example, or people that are connected to the president or that are aligned with the political party that is ruling at a given time.
Right. And so you touched about a very important thing, which is independence. And then Mr. Marcus also touched about confidence. Both of you also touched on confidence at large. And so I remember very well that a former US President, Barack Obama, said that what Africa needs is not strong men. Rather, we need stronger institutions. And if issues of lack of independence of these same institutions plus lack of confidence in these same institutions are occurring on the continent and in the Sahel region, thereby stifling the growth of democracy on the continent, then that means that that is a matter of worry. So the question is, how do we rebuild confidence in our institutions that are losing that trust from the citizenry? And also, how do we ensure the independence of these institutions in order to harness the dividend of democracy? Take a bite on it, Mr. Miami, and then Marcus. Mr. Marcus, you would also have a bite on it. But first, Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, there are different things that we can do to ensure that there is confidence in our systems and processes, especially so democratic institutions. And I agree with you that we need strong institutions and not strong men. Once we have institutions that have the capacity, both technical and logistical capacity, they have the manpower, they have the logistics, they have the resources, and they have the space. They will then operate in ways that will be in line with their mandates and will then enjoy the confidence of the people, not just the people, but development partners and other stakeholders. Some of the things that we can do would be first to ensure that people who serve at different institutions, especially institutions that have very critical functions like the judiciary, like the public integrity institutions or anti-graft institutions, institutions that are dealing with corruption or fighting against fraud, waste, and abuse, the General Auditing Commission, for example, or the Supreme Audit Institution of Liberia and other countries, integrity institutions like what we call the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission that leads on fighting against corruption, institutions like the Governance Commission, the Civil Service Agency. These are all institutions that are supposed to have people who the public can trust and partners can trust. So the quality of people that are recruited to serve in strategic positions at different institutions should be at the very highest level. That will help in ensuring that there is confidence in them, firstly, and then also confidence in the things that they do. That's one. The other piece is some of these institutions are established and the law requires that they have financial independence. So beyond just being independent in terms of their operation, financially, the law provides that, for example, the General Auditing Commission or the Supreme Audit Institution in Liberia receive its budgetary allotment, annual allotment at different intervals, such that it doesn't have to go to the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning for resources every now and then. It helps to undermine, the work. But we have not seen that for the most part. Of course, that has been changing a little bit over time, but that financial independence exists mostly on paper. It does not exist in practice in terms of the government enforcing the law. So that's one area that we can address in terms of ensuring that there is confidence in the system. Enforcing the laws we have, that is a general problem in Africa. We have very good laws to deal with money issues, to deal with natural governance issues, to deal with issues in the land sector, to deal with corruption issues, to deal with issues in the around security sector reforms and all of that. But the challenge has always been lack of enforcement of these different laws and policies. Government not putting the requisite resources into different institutions to operate. So once we can do some of these things, it will help. Civic engagement is also extremely important. We need to build citizens' capacity. We need to provide information to them in different platforms and tools using technology and other means that can help them to demand accountability of their leaders. If you have citizens demanding accountability, if you have platforms that they can use to engage the media, social media, traditional media, community level engagements, they will help to mount pressure on their leaders, and it will eventually lead to people knowing that they have people watching, civil society is watching, the media is very important in this process in terms of the independent role. If you have all of these different pieces coming together to work, you will have confidence in the system. And of course, at the end of the day, the essence of democracy is for the government to serve the people the best way possible in terms of public service delivery, in terms of fulfilling the basic rights, the right to education, the right to quality health care, and all of that. That will ultimately be what happens once you have all of these institutions operating fully with the kind of support needed and the independence needed.
Right. So thank you very much, Mr. Anderson Miami. Let me go all the way to Sierra Leone, Mr. Marcus Bankura. You should have a bite on how can institutions be strengthened to repose confidence in strengthening democracy.
Yeah, thank you very much. One of the major reasons why Africa has lagged behind, why my country has been retrogressing progressively, it is because of the fact that we lack very strong institutions and because of the lack of political will. Now, if you look at appointments are done by the president. They go to parliament approves. So if we are to have the balance of a very strong democratic system in the country, it is for the president to make his appointments on the grounds of meritocracy. But most times it is being done on partisanship. You will see that there are certain individuals, they are square pegs in round holes. But as far as those individuals contributed to the political party coming to power, most times the president or the government don't look at what they will deliver. They just endeavor to ensure that they satisfy that individual and others behind him. And if we continue like that, as that is what we've been doing from independence to now, the country will really not progress. If you look at the question of accountability, which is a major principle of good governance, accountability and transparency, which is very, very lacking, one area of my intervention, you find out that most public officials are not accountable, and they frown at accountability. That is why when most times we level criticism on certain things that has to do with accountability, they shed eyebrows on us. They consider us to be bad people trying to undermine government, because few people in their little corner will divert state resources to their own personal use, which will affect the nation, which is very, very bad. And that brings to mind the Anti-Corruption Commission, which has a role to play. If the Anti-Corruption Commission, right, is being influenced strongly by partisan politics, the possibility for the government or for the agency, that is the Anti-Corruption Commission, to actually bring people to book would be very, very difficult. Like in Sierra Leone, I have always said that our ACC is very good at playing, external games and scoring spectacular goals. But when it comes to home matches, they are not performing. That is to say, when, for example, this government came to power in 2018, a commission of inquiry was established. And at the end of the day, it was proven that members of the former government exploited the nation through corruption. And the ACC was very active and vibrant in going after those individuals. So that's why I said they are very good at playing away matches and scoring spectacular goals. Now that that time has passed, and the government officials now have embarked on serious corruption, we've seen cases of corruption the anti-corruption has played very little role in bringing those individuals to book. And that comes to, which is in line with Barack Obama, talking about having strong institutions rather than having very powerful individuals in our country or in Africa as a whole. Transparency is another issue. When you talk about service delivery, one major factor why our country has not been progressing, or Africa in general, it is because of poor service delivery. If you look at our State House, which was caught on fire quite recently, the report says that it was as a result of substandard electrical materials. It is as a result of overloading of sockets and extensions. So, which is to
Standard
say
electrical materials.
Before, yes. So, which is to say that when the building itself was renovated, right, we had contractors, and these contractors bought substandard materials. I want to believe, because if the report says so, then we can't only limit it. That is just a mirror to reflect the whole of Sierra Leone as to how we have substandard materials. Then there comes the Standard Bureau. We have the Standard Bureau, the institution responsible to actually check on the quality of materials brought into the country. You understand? Then ACC has to come into this conversation because of the fact that when contracts are given out, the ACC, according to their act as amended, you understand, is play very instrumental role in making sure that an individual or a company or whatsoever is giving that contract. When you look at all these things, it's very difficult. So for us to actually overhaul the system, right, in the first place, we should have a constitution that is respected by all. Because once we have a constitution, which is a sacred document, and that constitution is well respected, and the judiciary is independent, because the independence of the judiciary plays a very important role for democracy and good governance to thrive in the country. But if, as we mentioned initially, if there is suspicion and distrust that my issue taken to courts will not be looked at properly, then democracy will not stand on its legs.
Right.
Never, and that's notwithstanding. We also look at political interference, political influence, partisan politics. Most people placed in these key positions is as a result of partisan politics. And once they are there, they care less about the principles upholding democracy, but rather do what their masters want them to do.
Right.
And once they do that, it is at the detriment of the nation.
Right. And so, just in case you just tuned in, you're definitely on the right frequency. This is West Africa Democracy Radio, and the program is Citizens Are. Today, we're looking at the role of institutions in supporting or hindering democracy. Your thoughts and comments are always welcome on all of our social media platforms. But at the moment, we'd want to, because of our time, we'd want to speed up conversation once again, and we want to look at issues sector by sector. And let me begin with the media and civil society space, where both of you actually play a critical role. We want to find out that how do media and civil society organizations work to ensure checks on institutional powers. Let me stay with you, Mr. Anderson Miami.
How can civil society and the media work? That's a good question. Civil society and the media play watchdog and other roles in sustaining and nurturing democracy. One of the things that civil society can do, as well as the media, is to help track independently or monitor what is happening at different levels. Public service delivery, for example, monitor activities and processes in education, health, and other critical sectors, and produce credible reports, not just highlighting the negatives or the issues, but also reporting whatever positives that exist in terms of the operations or the functioning of these sectors. With that kind of report, credible report, independent report from the media and civil society, investigative journalism, for example, to look at specific issues that come up, whether on mining, whether on forestry sector, whether on education, health. That would help to ensure that information is available, independent information is available that policymakers can use to inform their decisions. Civil society and the media can also sensitize the public. That's a very important function. Civic engagement is an important part of democracy. If citizens do not have the information, electoral education, for example, or civic education, these are important things that need to happen. What rights do people have? What responsibilities do citizens have? Is it all about criticizing their leaders, or citizens also have to denounce corruption and lead by example in the things they do in the homes? So civic engagement is an important part of democracy, and civil society and the media can help to play that role very well as well.
Right. Let me still stay with you. While you talk about all the good things that ought to be worked out by the media and civil society, can this same institution be manipulated by the powerful in society, where, i.e., political parties actually set up civil society institutions? They run the affairs of it behind closed doors, make some people frontline it as if they're championing a particular cause, yet they are just pushing a particular interest, and thereby that may not necessarily be in the interest of the society, as well as media setup as well, because we know media ownership, we know how political influencers obviously set up media stations and then use it to play all of their propaganda agenda in just making a particular government unpopular, thereby stifling the growth of institutions. Other possibilities that media and civil society can also be manipulated by powerful few in society that thereby hinder democracy?
Yeah, true. And that has been happening in West Africa and even in Liberia. Media ownership is something that we have been looking at. There are different politicians that have media institutions, either newspapers or radio stations at different levels, at the national level and also at the sub-national level. And these institutions mainly engage into, propaganda in terms of, like you said, if this person is from the ruling party, it means much of the contents on that radio station or in that newspaper will be favorable to the government. If this person is from the opposition, it means that most of the things that they will be saying would be issues, that the government is confronted by. Some of the time they do so lawfully, but there are other instances that they fabricate stories and all of that. So the media has been used over time. As much as the media has played a very important role, civil society has also played very important roles. Some of the time, the civil society organizations that are supported by politicians, and the only time you hear them issuing statements, for example, is when a particular politician has been accused of corruption. They would then issue a statement criticizing the anti-graft institution or the integrity institution that has accused this public official, and they will basically be saying this person has a very good character, and we believe that this allegation against him or her, is false and all of that. So media influence, or the owners of media institutions, especially so politicians, have been helping to reduce public confidence in a way in the media and civil society. We've also seen people leaving civil society and going to government and coming back to civil society. That affects their level of independence. There are institutions here in Liberia that are having some issues because the heads were once in civil society, they moved to government, came back to civil society, but then the confidence that the public had in that institution and even partners no longer exists, or it is not at that level because they consider them as politicians and all of that. So media ownership, media influence when it comes to political connection, alignment, all of that can help to affect the way they operate and how the public sees them.
Right. Thank you very much with that particular submission. Let me also travel all the way to Sierra Leone and then engage Mr. Marcus Bankura once again. So I want to find out that on a sub-regional level, at a regional bloc level, how does ECOWAS support democracy in various respective countries and strengthening institutions as well?
Yeah, of course, we know that ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States, comprise of member states within the sub-region, which is, by all intents and purposes, is expected to be a very powerful wing. Although it is a loose form of a union, wherein there is no direct central command. But what is important is the fact that there is some amount of control within the sub-region, although sometimes they are described as making huge lot of noise without acting. So as a result of that, they have faced some levels of criticism. But nevertheless, ECOWAS, if there is the political will, if they are in readiness and willingness, they can overturn a lot of things that are hindering democracy in the sub-region. But we've seen very little of what they have been doing. Say, for example, we have the ECOWAS Parliament. That ECOWAS Parliament comprises of member states, representation. And as a result of that, that could have been, a place wherein key issues will be discussed, decisions taken, and enforced. Doesn't mean it should always be by force, but they can apply a method of negotiation to succeed where everything fails. Then they apply what is necessary. It was done in Sierra Leone in 1997, following the removal or overthrow of the late Amartyan Kaba's government under the SNPP. When all effort was made for negotiation, it failed. We had ECOWAS forces, ECOMOG, the military wing that came and restored democracy, which is to say that they have the power, they have the authority, to restore democracy in most of our countries. But because of the double role they play, because of the double impact they want to create, right? Most times they don't do what is correct. If I can reflect during the 2023 elections, ECOWAS members, the old guards, were having meeting when I asked Goodluck Jonathan, because he came, he was one of the representatives. After he spoke, I questioned him that you were expecting much from you guys. And if anything happens in our democracy, we will hold you accountable. You understand? And he assured us that things will be fine. Things will go on as required. At the end of the day, we saw a lot of holy around, commotions and disturbances. So ECOWAS has a lot of significant role to play. This is just a sub-region, and as a sub-region, ECOWAS is what is gluing us together, though we are independent states, individual states, but because of that union, and there is a structure, and there is some amount of command, and they should use that command, that structure, to ensure that when it comes to election, they should come with clean hands. They say he who talks about equity must come with clean hands. So when ECOWAS officials come to monitor elections, they should come with clean hands to ensure that democracy is what we desired, and it is what the people want. The choice of the people comes first, and they should work, assiduously to ensure that is done in that particular country. But we have seen very little of that. I stand to be criticized on that, you understand? But that is my own point. It is my own view. You come to the area of conflict, right? We know that we have the military wing. That military wing should be empowered. But how many of us, that is to say, nation states, the leadership, are willing, say, for example, if there's an issue in one area, to contribute troops, right? That's why I said it lacks that central command, because they don't have their own military. They rely on these states within the sub-region to give them military officers when there is an issue at a particular, but how many of them are willing? They talk about finance, they talk about a lot of things, but all that depends on the interests of that particular nation state, the interest of that particular nation state, right? Because ECOWAS, as far as I'm concerned, it is good. It started as an economic, to address economic problems in the sub-region, and it went on to address political issues that emerged. That is why it has a judicial wing, it has a parliamentary wing, to address issues within the sub-region.
Right. Thank you very much. Well, gentlemen, our time is fast spent, but I'm very, very grateful for your contributions on the program. But before I take your final concluding remarks on how can institutions who ought to strengthen democracy are rather hindering it, one will look at one critical body, which is the Electoral Commission. I know you've all touched on it, but in some 1 minute submission each, I would want to find out that how can electoral institutions prevent political interference? How? Because obviously the electoral commissioners are obviously appointed by the ruling party of the day. And one way or the other, they may be politicized to do the bidding of the government of the day, neglecting the interests of the entire citizen. In a minute each, how can the electoral body act independently and ensure a free and fair elections beyond voting as well? Mr. Bangura, take a minute, and then Mr. Marcos, you take a minute as well. Yes,
Did you say Bangura first?
Yes, please. Mr. Bangura first, you take a minute, and then Mr. Anderson, you also take a minute.
Okay. To start with, the Electoral Commission should be independent. The establishment of the Electoral Commission is based on independence. Another area, the Electoral Commission should do consultation in its activities. For example, where the president appoints an individual to be the Electoral Commission, and that individual must be seen and be satisfied with the other political parties. But we have seen situations wherein the president will just come and make an appointment, and even when the opposition criticizes that they are not satisfied, it goes ahead. And that is where the seed of discord is notched at that particular level where the electoral commissioner is appointed. And it is expected to be independent. To be independent in the first place, you look at how they recruit members, how they make appointments, to occupy enviable positions. If it is done wherein members of a political party or a particular region are given the enviable positions of authority, you understand, they are in control. It leads to suspicion. Once suspicion arises, what happens? There will be dissatisfaction over it. So, and also, they should make sure that, like in the case of Sierra Leone, we've got a lot of issues about how the result itself, how the elections should be conducted. For example, we are using the first past the post system. And the first past the post system has existed for some time, for quite too long. Then proportional representation was brought. But as we spoke about civic education, a lot of Sierra Leoneans were not educated properly about the proportional representation. And that can lead to conflicts. Police, the military security personnel should respect the law, and they should not take sides. Most times when it comes to voting in specific areas, you see military officers are all over the place. And that will scare away in the electorate in those areas. So if those things are taken into consideration, it's only 1 minute. I wish we could have got more time, or it could be another chapter for discussion. You understand?
Yeah.
So far, I will stop here because of time.
Very well noted. And then, Mr. Anderson, your take on how electoral bodies can also contribute to deepening democracy?
My colleague has spoken to many of the things that they need to do. I agree with all of what he said. I will add my voice to maybe emphasize the issue of civic engagement. That's important. Citizens need to engage more with the electoral process, understand their rights and responsibilities. That's important, so that decision making is informed by adequate knowledge, and not people electing people who do not have what it takes to really serve. That's important. Of course, the electoral body wouldn't do that alone. They will have to work with the media, civil society, and other stakeholders to do so. But they have to lead that process in terms of ensuring that there is enough voters education during election, because we've had multiple issues around invalid votes. But then civic education has also been an issue in terms of people understanding their rights. Many people will say they wouldn't vote because they don't have trust in the system, they don't have faith in the system, and all of that. Another point that I want to make is the whole issue around, for example, dealing with complaints that result from electoral processes. There have been concerns around the electoral body in Liberia, for example, having its own complete complaint handling mechanism, a hearing officer that hears matters. So people have been saying that that is not an effective way of doing it. So electoral reform in terms of ensuring that if issues come from elections, you can have independent bodies that can hear those issues instead of the electoral commission hearing those issues. Of course, people can take appeal to the court if they feel aggrieved or they are not happy about the decisions of the elections commission. But I think we need to look into reforming our electoral laws to ensure that there are independent structures that can deal with complaints that emanate from electoral processes from the very beginning, and not having to go to the commission that organize, these elections and the different processes. Transparency in terms of operation of the electoral commission is important. Recently, we had some allegations of corruption involving the head of the electoral commission in Liberia, and lack of transparency around some of the processes that characterized the 2023 elections. So how the electoral bodies operate in terms of being accountable, in terms of being transparent, will also help to sustain democracy and increase public confidence in what they do.
Right. Thank you very much. I trust that was also your closing remarks as well, Mr. Anderson.
Oh, yes. If I'm closing, I would say thank you for this opportunity. We probably need to have many of these kinds of conversations. Democracy must work for the people. Citizens must be the true beneficiaries of democracy and not public officials, many of whom in many countries get elected to get rich or to enrich themselves rather than doing those things that will lift people out of poverty. Many promises are made during elections. Those promises are not fulfilled. As a result of that, many people are disappointed in the government. There's limited trust. So we need to build trust. We need to give citizens more reasons why they should continue to vote. They should continue to participate in the different processes, because their participation is critical. They should benefit. Services must be provided. They should be adequate, and the justice system, the judiciary, and all the other institutions, including integrity institutions, must work. We need to deal with corruption. That is the biggest problem we have in Africa. Once we deal with corruption, we will not have to worry about USAID, the US government withdrawing support from African countries. We wouldn't worry about, some of the things we worry about, because we have enough that can get us to do what we need to do, not just Liberia, but our neighbor right here in Sierra Leone and many of the other countries. Thank you for having us to be a part of this engagement. We look forward to future engagements.
Definitely. Thank you very much also. And then Mr. Marcus, under some 30 seconds, please, your closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity given to me again to actually contribute in this important discussion. I appreciate you so much. And also, Africa has suffered for some time, for quite too long. And after independence, post-independence era has not been too good for Africans. So that is why, as Africans, we need to stand tall. We need to doubly redouble our efforts to ensure that we give the people what they want. In as much as we are going with Western democracy. We had our democracy before, right? We are going with Western democracy. Let's respect the rules. Let's go by the dictates of the principles of democracy and good governance. Once we do that, it will be fine. And in realizing that, accountability, transparency must be taken into consideration.
Right, realizing that accountability and transparency must be taken into consideration to deepen democracy. This is where we end today's edition of the debate on Citizens Are on West Africa Democracy Radio. And the topic we looked at was the role of institutions in promoting or hindering democracy. Our guests have been Anderson Miami, the Executive Director with the Center for Transparency and Accountability Center from Liberia, and Marcus Bangura from Sierra Leone. He is the Executive Director for Citizens Forum for Democratic Accountability, C4D.